Go beverage. We're live, 7:08. I told you I'd be back. Right now, we are going to talk about I'm taking a look at it right now. In fact, the old Motor Trend article. This test was done way back in 2003. Matt King did a story. He did lots of stuff for those guys. This probably was for Hot Rod or Carcraft way back in the day. And what they did was took a stock 5-liter 302 short block hydraulic roller late model deal. It says that they did they did a little bit of a rebuild on it. It says new rings and bearings, but the pistons were still stock and stuff. And so the compression was still the same. They kept the stock 5-liter stick camshaft in it, which is the big deal here, because they ended up making more than 400 horsepower using that mild stock cam. But I don't think you can do that. And I don't know what the difference is. Excuse me. But I want to talk about it a little bit because I've run lots and lots of tests on these. I've run dozens of small block 5-liter Fords from way back in the day. I've obviously written books on it. And so I've done my share of these and I know what they do. I've also run all of the things that they've run on here. I've run the dual plane intake, the carburetor, the airflow research heads, rocker arms. I tested all of them individually and stuff. I haven't put this exact combination together. So I want to try to make it work. But here's the gist of the story. So they took this stock bottom end. They ran it with the stock cam, the stock heads, a Wyand dual plane stealth intake manifold, some 4-barrel carburetor. It says to look at the sidebar on this thing, and I don't see a sidebar on here. Unfortunately, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, and that is that, hey, Motor Trend, when you're putting these old articles up online, put the whole thing up. We want the whole thing. We want to go here and read the whole thing, and we want to see all of the photos. This doesn't have all of the photos that were originally in this story, and it doesn't have all of the story. It doesn't have the sidebar. It doesn't have a bunch of stuff. So we want all that. So make sure that when you put this up, there's room. It's the internet. There's an infinite amount of room. So put all of that stuff up. And I see this all the time, and guys complain about it all the time. I'm not the only guy. When they go and look these up, there's a whole bunch of data and a whole bunch of important parts of this story missing. Usually the part that you went there to look for to begin with. So please, when you guys put these stories up, you still have all of this stuff. Just make sure it's all there when you put it up. But this particular test, so they ran this stock, basically a stock 5-liter long block, stock cam, dual plane intake, some kind of 4-barrel now. I don't know which one it is. Later on, they will swap over to a 625 Road Demon. But it doesn't say what they use. This time, they ran stock exhaust manifolds, so the factory tubular, pinch deals, the stock 5-liter Ford Mustang manifolds, some sort of dual exhaust. And when they ran it in this condition, they ran it on the dyno at Westech, like I do all of my stuff. It made 278 horsepower at 5,200 and 315 foot-pounds of torque at 4,100. But here's the thing. Having run at least a half a dozen of these 5-liter Fords with the stock heads, the stock cam, the stock short block, a dual plane intake manifold, a carburetor, the one thing that they also did have is they had tri-Y headers on it. So I'm hoping that the tri-Y header contingent out there is going to tell me, well, yeah, that's where all the power is. And it would be great that it would be that's the case. Having done lots and lots of header tests, I don't think that that's going to be the case. But and they would run tri-Y headers on it later on. They didn't in this case. In this case, they just had the stock exhaust manifolds on it, but they would put tri-Y headers on it as part of their upgrade. So it made 278 horsepower. So I want to start right there. Having run a bunch of these, both fuel injected and carbureted, every one that I've run is about 20 horsepower less than this. The torque number seems like it's realistic, but having run these with the Speedmaster versions of their air gap style dual plane intake manifold, I've run some. I don't know if I've run it with a Stealth. I'd have to go back and look. But Performer RPMs, Performers, air gaps, the professional products, the Pro Comp or Speedmaster versions of these intake manifolds. Having run all of these, And the ones that I've run that they're making 255, 256, 57, 58, the ones that I've run have also had headers on them. They have long tube 1.75" or 1.7" long tube Hooker Super Comp headers, the headers that we run on everything. So they're making less and they have a better exhaust, because I know that the headers are worth power even on a stock motor. I've tested that many times. So the headers are actually worth a little bit of power, less on a stock motor than they are on a modified motor, but they are worth some over the stock exhaust manifolds at any power level, even bone stock. So right off the bat, we're starting off with what I believe is the number is too high for what this combination is. I've run a bunch of these and none of them have made anywhere near this. In fact, I've run stock Explorer 5 liters with the GT40P heads with a dual plane and headers and a carburetor, and it doesn't make 278 horsepower. So it's 10 or 15 maybe better than the stock ones, but it's not this. And so right off the bat, it makes me wonder what's going on. And so the next step is they put on Airflow Research 165 heads. They kept the stock camshaft in there. They put 165 heads on, which are a very, very good, obviously, go-to small block Ford head for that 302. It's an awesome head upgrade. And I've run them many times and they work very well. And in fact, if I was going to pick a head and try to make the most power that I was going to make, I would pick an Airflow Research head probably on these small block Fords. I would pick a 185 over a 165, but on something with a stock cam, because of the lift range, I don't think you're going to see the gain from the bigger head. So 165 is ideal. The thing flows 245 CFM, the ones that they tested, 165 on the exhaust. To put that into perspective, the exhaust flow on this Airflow Research head is more than the intake flow on a stock head. So the heads are a big upgrade. While they did the heads, they also did tri-Y headers in place of the stock exhaust manifolds, and then put this 625 Road Demon carburetor on there, which at this power level, I think I would run a 650 on there, but this is enough for this power level. So when they put the heads on and the headers and the Road Demon, still stock rockers, still the YN Stealth dual plane intake manifold, the power jumped from 278 to 382. So more than 100 horsepower, 104 horsepower. Now, here's what I can tell you. I've done lots and lots of 5-liter cylinder rated upgrades. Done 30 in just one stretch where we tested them all on various different combinations. And an Airflow Research head will add 100 horsepower. I have no doubt about that, all by itself. I've done some that have added, 96 and 97 horsepower. So the 100 horsepower thing, especially if you also changed headers and then put this other carburetor on, that's perfectly believable. Here's the problem I have. All of the tests where I've done the head upgrade, they already had cams in them. So when we did the head upgrade, the head was able to take advantage of it, had a much better motor, so it could take advantage of having a better motor, and now it needs the head flow. On a stock camshaft, it doesn't really need the head flow nearly as much as it would if it had a 274 camshaft that has more duration, that wants to make more power upstairs, that has more lift, to take advantage of where most of the additional head flow comes from. So I just don't think. And then to top, the next step was that they added 1.7 roller rockers. So they had the 1.6 stamped steel rockers. They ordered the Airflow Research heads so that they could utilize the bolt-on stock rockers, and then they put a bolt-on 1.7 ratio aluminum roller rocker on, and picked power up from 382 to 405 horsepower. So they're saying the rocker upgrade by itself was worth 23 horsepower. All of these gains seem way high to me, having tested all of these. I've never seen 23 horsepower from a rocker change. And actually, of all of those things, I might believe that one, because the rocker test was done last, and it was done when it had enough intake and it had enough cylinder head, and this combination would definitely want more camshaft. So had we put a camshaft in there, we would have saw a lot of power from the camshaft. Adding roller rockers is a little bit like changing the camshaft. You're only changing the lift primarily and the duration, maybe a couple of degrees, but we could get gains from that. So maybe that's right. Again, I still think it's too much. I've not seen a roller rocker change be worth that much power, but it's maybe possible. But all of these things are just much more than I think that they should be. And again, I'm not just giving my opinion on this. I'm basing this on, I went through data for hours on this, looking for, well, how much are heads worth? How much are headers worth? How much are rockers worth? What have you ever made with a stock camshaft? All, because I've run lots and lots and lots of these. And whenever I do that and it does the same thing like 5 or 6 or 7 times in a row, you're like, that's probably what they make. I think we could, if I did it once, we could have had a bad one. Maybe it had a low cylinder or whatever, but it had a big, gouge in the cylinder. It wasn't sealed, whatever the deal is. Okay. That one isn't a good, accurate representation, but I've done, like I said, at least a half dozen stock ones, probably more if I went back and really dug. And then I've also done other, like the Explorer version and Cobra versions and SN95 versions and all sorts of other things, different head tests and all sorts of things that give me the data I think that I need to determine whether or not this is possible. I honestly don't think that if I duplicated this, that we're going to get 400, but I want to try it. I want to see. I want to put rockers on it. I'll try white headers. We'll try a 625. I don't know if Westec has any more road demons, but maybe we could do a brawler or something. I don't think the carburetor is going to hold us back. I'm sure I can get a YN Stealth for it. I'm kind of curious now to see how the YN Stealth, how that compares to the RPM air gap, which is kind of the go-to manifold when we're trying to make power with stuff. But these are the reasons why, and I remember, and all this stems from years back when I had a discussion with somebody about, well, you can easily make 400 horsepower with a stock cam. I'm like, no, I honestly don't think you can. And I'm not saying that because I don't want it to happen. I would want it to happen. I'm saying that because I have all of this data to me that suggests that's probably not reality. And so I'm going off of that. But when I test it, then I'll be able to tell you, hey, look, this is what I got. And then we'll be able to see. So let's see what you guys got going on. And we'll get some poorly calibrated dyno. No, the dyno seems to work. Not enough duration for that head flow. Yep. I missed the last live stream, but it would be cool to see the other guys 4VV10 they're making on the dyno. Well, hopefully they'll run it. That will be good. And honestly, I think on the 4V thing, while I salute the guys that are doing that, given the head flow that the ported version, when we were talking to the gentleman, JR, I think, when we were talking to a gentleman that has a 1,000 horsepower, 6.8 liter twin turbo deal that he's racing, that if you can get the 3-valve heads to flow 330 or 340 or something like that, that's enough to make a lot of power. And those are already on there and they already bolt on. You don't have to have the 4-valve heads to make that work. I mean, it'd be cool to have but then you have to have more cams and all that. But like I said, I salute the guys that are doing it, just like guys that are putting Boss heads on the 4.9 liter inline 6-cylinder LS heads on it. I salute that. I think that's all fantastic. But I don't think that's limiting power. In the case of that inline 6-cylinder, those heads don't flow well. But the 3-valve heads on this V10 definitely do flow, especially after they're ported. James, you made the live feeds. Did you bring all the other Jameses with you? You have 3 lives in Galaga? Are you really playing Galaga? And did you see the movie Pixels? Sandy Valley checking in. No power steering drag. No, it was run the way that I normally run stuff with. And again, that doesn't matter because I run it the same way. We run it with an electric water pump. All that's why instead of on a 5-liter Ford, that's why instead of making the 225 that it's rated at, it makes 258 because it doesn't have that, and it usually has a good open exhaust and stuff. Took me some money to hit 400 horsepower. I've run lots and lots of 400 horsepower small block Ford combinations, and they've all had good heads and a decent camshaft. I do, James. I do have a frosty cold beverage. AFR heads, little chambers, big cam, single plane headers, and a lot of time to get to 400. That rocker change increase seems like a bit of BS. A set of double roller rockers brought me 24 horsepower on my big block olds. Changing from 1.6 to 1.7. they did do that. Yeah, the rollers by themselves may be of little benefit. Ran a high compression 306 with AFR 274 cam and smoked almost everybody on the street. Cool. How much RPM does it take to get 400 horsepower from a 5-liter? It's going to be up near 6,000. They made peak power at, let's see if that says where they made. I think it does. Stock, it made it at 5,200, 382 at 6,000. Yeah, and then 6,200 for the 405. Yeah, Mike, I'm with you. I just don't think that that's real. Say for push rods and roller rockers is better. I don't think with the springs that are involved on a stock cam that there's going to be any kind of push rod deflection. Big Belly, what's up? Richard, you don't need to go 6,800 or 7,000. Maybe 400 at the tire, but not 400 at the flywheel. In stock limiter class, you can run stock lift but as much duration. Yeah, this wasn't a cheater cam. It was just a stock one. Isn't the L59 flex fuel with larger injectors? Yes. 706 heads on an LS1 and flat tops with valve notches. Yeah, the 706 head's better than the 241 head anyway, so it's going to make more power than a 241 head. Stock motor turbo sounds way easier. It is. We do need a poll. Juan, get a 5.3 L59. You just get any 5.3. They're all good. Interview with Alex Flores. Who's that? Dang it. I think my beverage. They didn't jump on all the James train. I'm Rick James. Which 302 stock cam? They used the 5-liter Ford Fuelie stick cam. Sounds like they're being paid by the vendors to show the number. So they were being paid by the people that make stock Ford cams. That's not a real thing. That's an internet myth. Joseph, that's the story that we're talking about. Ford E303 cam, TG40 heads. If you already have 1.6 roller rockers, I wouldn't put 1.7 roller rockers on it. The gain that you're going to get is going to be very minimal. There's a big difference between stock cam and stock lift. This was a stock 5-liter Ford cam. Angel, how much would it cost to make 500 wheel horsepower on what? Built a 306 Winder years ago with one of the Alphabet cams, 205 heads. Put 205 heads in your 306. By the way, if you know somebody willing, you should test 10 into 1 equal length headers. Should sound like a V10 F1 car. Did they run all of their exhaust into a single outlet on a V10? I can kind of make the headers however I want. I'm thinking about welding some up myself. Yeah, Alan, see, that's right. I'm Rick James. Dave Chappelle. Edward, before I came to school, Richard, the comp cams guys told me to go away from the 274 cam and do a 236 cam, my 331, because I wanted to turbo the engine. I wouldn't do that. Yeah, Edward, I would do that. I wouldn't run a single pattern cam, and I wouldn't run a single pattern cam that's that big. Does methanol injection kits, do they work, and are they worth the money? I don't know about being worth the money, but they do work. They will suppress detonation. They're better than not having anything. They're not as good as intercooling, and they're not as good as E85, but they are better than not having it. The Don Sherman. This isn't Don Sherman. Matt King did this story. I don't know who that is, so I don't know who Alejandro is. Methanol kits are okay till you run out or the pump dies. Yeah, the distribution to me can be problematic as well. But all that will be solved when I do the methanol injection in front of the turbo. Reloading, I'm late to the live feed to watch the first 10 minutes. I get frustrated when Motor Trend only puts part of the article on the internet. I'm guessing it was because they wanted you to pay. I don't think that's it, because I don't think the rest of the article is behind any kind of paywall. So I don't know what it is. But they're putting it up there, so I don't know why they don't give you the rest of it. Maybe I'll talk to Freiberger. He may know. He may not. He's not in charge of any of that, but. Saw a video that recently had a small block Ford Windsor with the 80 into 1 headers. We've seen it on a lot of LS stuff on sand buggies. It sounds cool. I don't know about power though. Any recommendations for a dual valve spring on LS for mild or stock build? Not rubbing it out just for durability, dependability, and fail safe to prevent valve drop. I don't know that you need a dual spring for that, but I do feel better not having a beehive spring, because if that breaks, then you can drop the valve. But I would just look at whatever the smallest dual spring kit that BTR, Texas Speed, or one of those guys has. Would following your 500 horsepower recipe on an L7 work for an L59? Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're replacing all of this stuff anyways. You're replacing the heads, cam, and intake to make 500 flywheel horsepower, but it's expensive. I mean, you have to buy really good ported heads, a fast intake manifold. The camshaft is going to be the same anyway, but long tube headers, it would be a lot cheaper just to put a turbo on it. I think Lucky is doing Motor Trend. Lucky has a show on Motor Trend. Yeah, he's doing Hot Rod Garage. He's doing a really good job. He and Alex are awesome. Hot Rod Guy Garage. I remember the article was talking about a few days ago, 400 horsepower stock cam. I'd say it spent a lot of dyno time to get those numbers. It didn't spend a lot of dyno time. They didn't. That wasn't the thing. Would the meth droplet start to erode the impeller? I think that they would. I think that they'd be detrimental to impeller life. Any sort of solid or semi-solid object hitting an impeller that's running 100,000 RPM or more, I don't think is good for it, but guys swear by it. Jeff Smith has a big block Chevy article on Motor Trend, and he gets some pretty big numbers from a small cam. I'd have to go back to see the numbers again. It's not a Motor Trend thing. It's not a universal thing. There's another big block story that I question as well. Meth injection deburrs the impeller after time. Do I consult for engine masters? No, not as a consultant. I'm here whenever Brule or Freiberg or any of those guys have questions, usually about turbo stuff, but sometimes just about tests that I've run. And then I will occasionally suggest stuff for them to test that I think will be good. Underdogs, burnout was 2 minutes and 36 seconds. That's a long time to be on the limiter. Have you found that E85 is not consistently E85? Yeah, most definitely. I don't personally care, but yeah, it doesn't all have to be 85. If you look at the pump by law, it doesn't have to be. I'm looking at EFI for my small block Chevy. Would you recommend the Sniper EFI style or their multi-port like the ProFlow Edelbrock? I don't know what you're trying to get done. I don't normally recommend the 4-hole throttle body stuff. I like port injection better. I want to see test the old school paint the underside of your intake white. So you want to paint the underside of an aluminum intake white? So are you trying to reject heat or are you trying to absorb heat? Rebuilding a 6.1 Hemi. One thing I do want to test, and I talked to the guys at MPMC about putting the insulator pads on the bottom of the LS intake manifolds. I don't think that's going to do anything, but I want to test it. When you do the 400 horsepower 302 tests, that we won't get to 400 horsepower, would be a good opportunity to do a CFM comparison on a 400 horsepower big block. I'd have to have also a 400 horsepower big block, but yeah, I do want to do that. Richard, for the 6-liter stock cam, Cleveland heads ported out, ported intake headers, jewelry rockers with a ratio, you probably have at least 400. I don't understand. You're combining Cleveland and 6-liter LS and Cleveland heads and rocker. Well, I don't know what you're doing there. Maybe I missed something earlier. Rebuilding a 6.1 Hemi to stock. Would love to create it and send it to you with some extra parts you recommend. Cams, heads. We would both learn something about the new engines. I've run 6.1 Hemis a lot already, so I kind of know what they do. I haven't run the 6.4s a lot, the new ones. James, you're on the 1500 horsepower LY6 video. Showed the Turbo Trailblazer SS owner of the video today. He was shocked at the reason why they stopped the test at 1500 horsepower because we actually, and it turns out we didn't just run out of map sensor. We had damaged that map sensor. You never heard about the 1200 4.8 back in 2011? Yeah, that's old school, man. It's OG. If you were to do an Engine Masters type build on a 5-liter small block Ford looking for maximum average power, would you use a 274 cam? No, I would use something much bigger than that. And it depends on what range of RPM that I was using, but I wouldn't use the stock 274 cam if I was trying to make average power. And especially if I didn't care about idle. Dean, it could be worth as much extra horsepower as side gapping plugs. That's what I'm getting a lot of requests for now after people have watched the gap thing. Can you do a side gap test? I'm like, yeah, haven't we been down this road already? Talking to tech guys at different turbo companies, they really have high horsepower numbers from the turbos, but refuse to show any compressor maps or data. I mean, if you take an 80 millimeter turbo, that's 1,000 horsepower turbo. In fact, if it's a real 80 millimeter turbo, it's probably well above that. So making big power from a turbo is not the thing. What I want to see these turbo companies do is I want them to show me where they ran 2 different 80 millimeter turbos and one where they didn't change the hot side so dramatically, where they just improved the wheel design, and show me a big power change from that, where they kept the hot side consistent, and just show me a wheel design change where they made, this new wheel design makes a lot more power. I want to see that. I don't want to see where they put a different 80 millimeter turbo on where they went from a 0.68 AR on the hot side and put a bigger exhaust wheel and went to a 125 AR on the hot side. And now they have half of the back pressure that they had before, and they made a lot more power. Yeah, that's great. But you did that for the obvious reason. That's what I want to see. I know that a real Garrett like GT45 makes 1 million more horsepower than the GT45 that I recommend to people as a 700 horsepower turbo, because a real GT45 is probably twice that. But I want to see some real testing that I haven't done. Got a guy who wants to put together a ring gap 6.1 Hemi. I've run turbos and stuff on Hemis, and they work good. Even stock ones, as long as you put ring gap in them. Jonathan, you want a 5-liter with Jessel rockers? Okay, let me see if I can plug that back into what you had said before. So you want to put a 5-liter with Cleveland heads on it? I was under the impression that the pads on the other side of the LS intake was to keep dirt and water out. It is. It's also for NVH, though. It's also to change the vibration, change the noise. But a lot of guys are saying, yeah, you put this gold foil thing or whatever on the valley cover on the bottom side of the intake manifold, and it stops heat. So it does all of these magic things. It stops heat from going from the aluminum part of the valley cover or the block or the heads up into the manifold, which the manifold is attached to all these things anyway. One of them is composite, so that the heat transfer is going to be less with that anyway. but it's in an enclosed engine compartment that's all really hot all around it. But this one thing underneath it is going to stop the heat of the engine going up into the manifold, not only into the manifold, not only to the surface of the manifold, but then from the surface of the manifold, it's going to get past the boundary layer while cold air is flowing in and actually cooling the manifold. It's going to get past that, past the boundary layer, and then change the very rapidly moving charge air. That's some magic blanket. I think Aladdin rode in on that one, on that carpet. And Jasmine, who, let's face it, I mean, Jasmine. We bored and stroked an LSA to 6.8 liters. I don't know what displacement that is. And unless you change the sleeve length, if you put a 4100 stroke on it, it's not a good idea. Did they deck the block to 0 and deck the heads as far as possible to bump the compression? They did not. It doesn't mention any of that. Would there be any benefit to running 85 on a heads cam intake small block? No. Let's see. Do you have a 5-bar map sensor? I think somebody sent me one. I don't think we need a 5-bar. I think 4 is probably fine. LS heads on 351 Windsor. Block was fun. Blew the crank and rods out of the block. Why did they do that? Were they not tuning it correctly or something? James, in your opinion, stick with an OE Gen 1 GT40 intake or Holly high rise? You got to tell me more. I need more information. I need more input. I need more data. I'm Johnny 5. I need to know what your combination is, how much power you're trying to make. The GT40 intake is definitely limiting. If all the other things are stock, I would stay with that intake manifold. If you have a cam and heads, or you're trying to make power at a higher engine speed, a Holly high ram would be good, or the Systemax, or you got to tell me what you're trying to do here. On a small block Ford, can I swap the valve springs at top dead center? You could swap the valve springs with the piston at TDC because the valve will come down and hit the piston, but it will still fall far enough where you will not be able to compress the spring that much. So what you need to do is put what a lot of guys do is feed rope or something in there and then bring the piston up. And so that the piston now with the rope in it contacts the valve and doesn't let the valve come down. Then it's all easy. I didn't see your previous thing, so I saw that you're converting it to carburetor. Oh, here we go. Look at EFI for my small block Chevy. I would just put a carburetor on it is what I would recommend. You should do a 6.1 Hemi Big Bang. I don't have any of those. You're looking to convert it from carb, no more than 420 horsepower. I think guys make my recommendation would be to do a dual plane intake manifold. And if the 4-hole throttle body, if you can get it to work, people are saying that you can. I personally haven't seen that. But if you can get it to work, that will make the most power because you have charge cooling with that. And you have some tunability. You can't tune individual cylinders, which you can with port injection, but you don't have charge cooling with port injection. So you can make a little bit more power with the throttle body on top. And I would recommend a dual plane manifold, which is why I go to the trouble of doing all that on that kind of application. We don't need a 5-bar map sensor. In fact, I don't like running those map sensors because it scales everything down. You only have 3 or 4 uh, levels in between each one, and just not, the tuning is not very good. Four horsepower stock cam and a stroker 427 small block Ford. Yeah, you could, if you make the motor bigger, you could make much more power. The AFR 185 head flows better than a Boss head. Does it? What's an AFR 185 head flow? Does it flow more than 275? What's needed to do? I'm hoping that that's LS7 1.8 rockers on a 6-liter or 5.3. You would have to weld the heads and then re-drill the rocker stud or rocker bolt position to run that rocker. And it's not a great rocker anyway, so you shouldn't do that. If you want to put 1/8 on it, you should just put aftermarket 1/8 that go on that head. How would you build a 5.8 351 100 horsepower per liter? So you want to make 580 horsepower out of a 5.8? That's going to be expensive, but you're going to need lots of head flow. First of all, it's going to take lots of camshaft, lots of RPM, a single plane intake manifold. It's not 100 horsepower per liter is not terribly difficult. All of the Engine Master stuff that we did was way more than that. But it stops becoming like a drivable thing. Yeah, James, the 5.7 Hemi works well if you put ring gap in it and tune it properly. It will make a lot of power. Carrie, you want to run a GT40 Explorer, the full swap into it? I would pick a small extreme energy cam from Comp. The 258, 262-ish things, I think, would be a good driver. I don't know if that's a R2 5-speed. It's a manual? Well, even if it's a manual trans. So I'll get you a part number. Yeah, the 258 or the 264. One's a 206, 212. The other one's a 212, 218. Those are all good. Either one of those would be good for a daily driver. What's the math for doing ring gap? 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. Kind of hard to scale when you only have a 16 by 16 map to work with. It's true. Then you only have one. Yeah, that's why I don't like that. I like have lots of room in between. Has anyone here opened up the Steam ports on the back of my LS? Lots of them are already opened. Only the later ones are closed. Yeah, Leroy, anything that you put in there, you put a shop towel in there. Usually the rope is easier to feed in there, or a piece of hose would be fine. Anything that coils up and allows the piston to just make contact with the valve, and that when you rotate it back, you can just pull it back out real easily after you put the spring on. You can run compressed air, which we do that normally, but I haven't ever done the rope trick that I can remember, but it does work. Any opinion on fancy? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. The 85 I used to fill the tangle definitely made a huge difference in performance overall. Quite a bit noticeable difference, in fact. The 85 does make power. on very high compression NA combinations or detonation limited combinations or boosted combinations. I know we're talking engines here, but do you have a martial arts background? I noticed a punching bag in the background in some of the videos. Yeah, we had that hung up in the backyard. Does anyone make phenolic spacers for an LS intake? Like for the intake manifold? The intake manifold is already composite, so you don't really need to insulate that. Mobar was smart. Just take a twin screw blower on a Hellcat and Demon. I was shocked when I discovered that. Most Gen 3 Hemi guys are rap fans and clueless about cars. Wow. The intake is bolted to the engine. Don't spoil the magic. No, the magic is there. Any opinion on fancy ceramic ball bearing turbos? I'd like to see. I think a ball bearing turbo is a good idea for longevity, possibly. I don't know that it helps spool, or at least I don't know to what extent it helps spool. I'd like to see a change in that where they didn't also change the turbo. Oh, we went from this turbo to this turbo, but it's all because of the ceramic ball bearings. No, it's not. It's because you changed the kind of turbo that you put on. I'd like to see just the change going from a journal bearing to that. I honestly don't think that I think that the spool rate, the change would be minimal from that, my guess. But I'd like to see it really tested. 7.5 per inch of bore is that's a good amount. I mean, if insulation doesn't work for intakes, and why is it done so often for land speed record cars, endurance cars, etc.? It absolutely works. It's not just magic; it's incremental. Okay. I'd like to see the change. I'd like to see the air temperature change. Because someone uses it is not a reason that's not a valid reason for it. That doesn't show that it works. I want to see the data. It seems like there isn't any aspect of a cam which would make it better for a turbo application, or did I misunderstand your recent video? No, I didn't say that. What I said was that every cam, including a turbo cam, when you add boost to it, you still gain the same percentage amount. A turbo cam doesn't all of a sudden gain more. I haven't ever seen that in any of the testing that I've done. And I've done more of this testing than probably most anybody, where we actually run the motor NA and optimize it, and then run a turbo at whatever boost level and then optimize it. The one thing that I haven't done, and I would admit that, I don't do this and max out the turbo and then see if the turbo cam somehow all of a sudden becomes better. I've seen people tell me that, like, one of the arguments that knuckleheads get into is that, well, but it lowers the back pressure. Yeah, it lowered the back pressure because it makes less horsepower. If you run two cams, you run a turbo cam and the NA cam, and the NA cam makes more horsepower, at 10 pounds of boost, the NA cam is going to make more power than the turbo cam, and it's going to have more back pressure. It's not going to have more back pressure because the turbo cam is better. It's going to have more back pressure because it's making more power and it has more exhaust flow. And when I mentioned that to them, they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you don't have the data to support what you're saying. You're just doing anecdotally, and you're saying that it has less back pressure. Yeah, but you're explaining part of the situation. More exhaust flow. It's just like with RPM. If we look at, and I need to bring this up on one of the deals, if we look at RPM, if we look at boost pressure versus back pressure at RPM, at low RPM, when it's just coming into boost, it has less back pressure than boost pressure. It has more boost pressure. Look, all that's going to bleed out. That doesn't happen. But it has less back pressure. And then the back pressure climbs at a much higher rate, at a much higher slope than the boost pressure does. The boost pressure, hopefully, stays 10 PSI all the way across. So if the boost pressure is flat, the back pressure climbs. When it starts, it's less than boost pressure and then becomes way more in most instances on most of the turbos that we run on these street strip kind of applications. It becomes more. So guys will argue, well, look, it made less there. I'm like, yeah, it made less at 2,000 RPM or 3,000 or until the crossover. And do we only want to talk about where it was 2-to-1 at 6,500 RPM? Do we want to talk where it was 1-to-1 at 4,000 RPM, or where it was negative at 3,000 RPM or 2,800? It's a whole discussion that needs to happen, but people are really, as we've seen out there in knucklehead land, that people are only really interested in like headlines and not interested in learning all of the stuff. James Ellis had on the Ford dyno test video is old, but the bottom end said peace. But why did you? They didn't break the bottom end because it had an LS head on it. I mean, if you put an LS head on a Ford, all you're doing is putting a good head on it, which you could have lots of good Ford heads that make as much power as any of the LS heads do. So what I want to know is, why did the bottom end break? What did they do? Did they not tune it correctly, which is often the case? Did they try to run a big bang on it and run 20 or 30 pounds on it? I just don't know what they did. Building an LT1. What year is it? And how much power do you want? And what else did you do to it? Phenolic spacers between the head and the intake to block the heat. I doubt you'd see anything. Recal. Got a small gear 350. Got to do Vortec head swap on it. What's a good cam to use? Derby motor usage. I'm not too familiar with where you run that thing, but I'm guessing it's a lot of on and off stuff. So I put a small cam on it. Look at the video that I have up where we did the 268 cam and the 246 cam. I'd lean more toward the smaller one. E85 woke up the Hemi program and cost $1 less per gallon. Yeah, than 93. And especially on a, like I said, any boosted kind of thing, it loves it. Would love to take a Z24 Cavalier and play with it, or a Grand Am with a Tech-4 or a Quad 4. Yeah, the Quad 4 would be cool. I remember driving the Z24 Cavaliers, especially the one that eventually got the ram air on it, or the cold air deal on it. We got to drive that. I got to drive that at Road America when Chevy was introducing, because I went to a long lead there. It's pretty cool. Although I like driving the big Caprice police car, because I was supremely confident that I could go flat in the kink, and the police car had almost wrote it off. But I gathered it up. Underdog, yeah, that's a lot of power. Again, a completely different M90 than the Buick one. I racked out the BTR cams, 119 LSA. It's tighter than the stock 122. If I was running a supercharged deal, especially a positive displacement supercharged deal, unless I was limited in an octane, I wouldn't have that wide of an LSA. Why won't Trick-Flogenics 260 heads work with smaller bores? I'll answer the question, but I also want to know why you would want to run those heads on a smaller bore, because they don't need it. But they have a big valves, and they have a different valve placement. And when the valve comes down, it'll hit the edge of the bore. We didn't ever do a poll, did we? Did I not do a poll today, or did I already turn it off? I can't remember now. Did you see the 3V Cleveland heads Eric tested? I did not. Yeah, Avery, that's a good part. I like Robert Young from Force Performance. He's a good guy and he's pretty knowledgeable. And so his conclusion was what we were talking about, that the ball bearing stuff will survive if you lose oil pressure on the launch. That's what I mean. Because I've had people tell me oh yeah, it's a ball bearing, and then it's a dual ball bearing, which would be even better, be twice as good. And that, yeah, I've had guys tell me, yeah, I improved the spool by 500 RPM or whatever. I'm like, you didn't do that with a bearing change. Randy, we were talking about that article before this whole time before this, we've been talking about that. The Motor Trend guys did it. Bam, bam, bam. I'm trying to scroll back here. Sarah, usually the 1.8 roller rockers, I think they may make some bolt down ones. Some of them require a guide plate and then a different push rod length. What's your way of cleaning aluminum deck and heads? I use a razor blade and then spray it with brake clean for junkyard stuff, or we send them to the machine shop and have them surfaced. How much power from a daily driver 347? How much do you want? And I have a bunch of recipes up on the channel. John, check with the guys at TPIS for LT1 cams. At what point do you have diminishing returns with more duration? You have a small buck forward, 13-to-1 compression, carb, current gamma is 254. What is the exhaust duration on there? 650 lift, 108 LSA. What RPM range are you running now? Do you have a single plane intake manifold? How much head flow do you have? The duration by itself isn't going to be a diminishing return. It's only going to be in relation to the other things that you have. If you're limited by head flow, adding duration sometimes won't do as much. Two V-stroke cleaver be good in a daily driver. Yeah, the bigger the motor is, the more it tames any kind of camshaft down. But Cleveland headed stuff is good, especially the aluminum stuff. But the thing is, you don't have to go to a Cleavor. You can just do a Windsor, or you could do that. Either one of them work. James, I'm honestly surprised we don't see any spam in here. Normally we did. We used to see a whole bunch of the girls kind of thing. Yo, I'm currently developing a 4-valve LS head. Currently flows 360 at 500 lift. That's a good amount. I don't know what you mean by is it a 4-valve head? Like an overhead cam head? I'm curious what an FBO Stinger is too. Much smaller camper demolition derby. I would think it would be an on-off throttle thing. So that 246, that pure energy one, actually works pretty good. Adrian, the TFS head has been discontinued. Richard, have you heard of the new aerogel intake for heat reduction? I have not. Let's see. Man, this thing goes fast. Still scrolling back, still trying to find out where I was. Here we go. Why not roller bearing turbos? People should not worry about the bearingness on the turbos. They should worry about picking the right turbo. With my new cams, will driving around town be different? Yes, it will. Ball bearing turbos do spool faster. I'd like to see the data. If you need a 5-liter for a Mustang, pull it from a Ford Vic, Lincoln Town, a Mercury Marauder, or a Explorer, right? I'm gathering parts for a 351 Windsor. Interested in torque more than horsepower. Oscar, look for, you can buy cheap heads for that, like the Skip White ones, or an Airflow Research Enforcer head, or a Trick Flow head. All those are good. Put a small camshaft in it. Is it possible to rebuild a turbo with different bearings? I don't know. I don't know if you can switch over, because I don't know what the machine surfaces are. I don't know if there's enough thickness in there to change them. You could put new ones in it, but I don't know if you could go from a journal to a ball bearing. What would be a good size LS to put in an 87 to 89 Suburban? A 6-liter would be the ideal one. Dean, I don't know what mistake you're talking about, and I don't believe it. I'm certain that it's not true. I would only ever believe it after I tested it. And as much as I like Steve Morris, I don't know what he said. I don't know what you're saying. And even if he said something, I would still go by my own data. And I'm sure he would too. Yeah, running boost with stock ring gap is a crapshoot because you don't know what it's going to do. You don't know how much temperature you're putting in. You don't know what the ring gap is when it's in there. Which is better, aluminum or steel heads? I would run aluminum heads on anything. Admiral, I don't know. That's what I was asking. I don't know if somebody had said that they discontinued the head, but there was only one aftermarket one, and that was Trickflow, and he said that they discontinued it. So I'd like to see if that's true. I'd like to see if a good ring package and some other hot rod tricks are used to make the 5-liter make more power than normal. They didn't do that. They put new rings in it, but it doesn't say anything about them being trick rings. Do you have a 302 Ford test with a 224 cam? Yeah, a lot of them. Almost any modified 302 that you see up on my channel will have that 224, 232 cam. Ragtop, again, having that wide LSA will have it make power out on the big end. You probably have enough for dealing with traction problems down low, so it's not an issue. But you will 100% make more power if you tighten the LSA up. You'll make more power down low. Let's see. I'm scrolling. Got 1 more minute. Can we talk about big cube Mercedes motors? You can talk about them all you want. I've never tested one, so I'm going to be of limited help. Who's spending $3,000 for it and can't afford a good cam? That's the thing. Do you think the 236 comp cam would make more power than the Anderson N61? I don't have any idea what the Anderson N61 cam is. I don't know what the specs are on it, so there would be no way for me to know that. Todd, thanks for showing up, man. And on that note, it's time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. And and I have a stock 302, so I can test this and see what's happening. Like I said, I'm very, very skeptical. That's just a really, really small cam, even with 1.7 rockers on it. But we'll see. And on that note, I will see you guys all in the morning. You can hear the puppies barking in the back. Bear, near.